could ever forget the PlayStation 2, a product that stood out as a revolutionary gaming console, achieving widespread success due to its exceptional features. Boasting an extensive and diverse game library, the PS2 catered to a wide range of gaming preferences, with iconic titles that have since become synonymous with the platform. Complemented by its backwards compatibility with the original PlayStation and the inclusion of a built-in DVD player, added significant value and versatility to the dawn of the Millennium marvel, making it not just a gaming device but a quintessential living room multimedia entertainment system. While this is well documented, what if I told you that this image, that looks very much like a PS2, is not from the new millennium at all, but instead the early 90s? So what on earth is going on here? I am Lady Decade, and this is the story of the PlayStation 2 that was spotted back in 1993. Knowing that most of you watching at home probably aren't stupid, I realise that those with a keen eye have likely already managed to note that this device looks like a PS2 bootleg, featuring a floppy disk drive and multiple other differences from the most popular game console of all time. However, the fact that this image existed 8 years before the first PS2 was manufactured, we know that for sure this is no bootleg. So let us begin to discuss the true origins of this mysterious device and whether or not it is linked to what would eventually become the PS2. While Sony has a relatively agreed upon dominance of the console space and has had that lead for years, it was hard fought and taken from Nintendo and Sega's constant bickering in the early to mid 90s. However, before either of these Japanese giants took over the West, we of course had Atari. In fact, much like how Sony has their hands in everything from music and movies to cameras and televisions, Atari didn't hedge all their bets on game consoles that could be plugged into the TV either, and at one point the company was heavily invested in the personal computer space. If you are a retro gaming enthusiast, you have likely heard of these ventures, such as the Atari ST for example. But even before the ST competed with the Amiga series, Apple Macintosh line and IBM compatibles, we had the more humble Atari 400 and 800. Systems that shared a very similar architecture to their consoleized counterpart, the infamous Atari 5200. During this quirky chapter in the gaming history of Atari chasing the home computer cash cow, Jack Tramiel, founder of Commodore, left the company in January 1984, only to simply purchase the Atari Consumer Division, then owned by Warner Brothers. Yes, the Warner Brothers that's best known for, well, currently being under the microscope for decisions David Zaslav would make in the pursuit of financial stability at the cost of creative endeavours. While no longer owning the Atari brand, the fact that they did so was not an outrageous concept. After all, today they do own NetherRealm Studios, the people behind Mortal Kombat. Now, under Tramiel's leadership, with a new and experienced blood behind the brand, the line was severely reduced and redesigned in cost-cutting measures. Still, new developments with former Commodore engineers would lead to the Atari ST, signalling the end of the 8-bit line. The ST, the first personal computer released with a bitmapped colour GUI, utilising the Motorola 68000, premiered at the January 1985 Consumer Electronics Show. This would become Atari's dominant computer line for the late 1980s, but by the early 1990s, like with any technological progression, they'd be looking at a new lineup. In this quest for market dominance, the Atari Falcon 030 was released in 1992 as effectively a supercharged Atari ST that can even play MP3 files. Powered by the Videl video controller, not the character from Dragon Ball Z, this system didn't particularly sell well. It would be discontinued as Atari restructured by the next year in anticipation of the Atari Jaguar. But this is where the story gets even more interesting. While not on shelves for long, it had several prototypes come about. Some used the Motorola 68040, but one in particular used a microbox case. Instead of a bulky computer box, as was the style at the time, this would be a slender device that could run both standing up or on its side. The patent for the PlayStation 2 design from 1999 begins average enough, with a number of mock-ups of the machine, both with a sharp edge and rounded corners. This ornamental design for an arithmetic and control unit document has reference to other publications, outright linking to the Atari Falcon 040 and Atari Falcon 030. While flying under the radar for most consumers, the Register would note the uncanny similarity between Sony's cutting-edge PlayStation 2 and home computer pioneer Atari's never-shipped Falcon 040 from 1993. The Falcon 040 was the follow-up to the Falcon 030, adding a 32-bit bus, Motorola 68040 CPU, and an alternative casing to the ST styling of the 030. Apparently, Atari only ever constructed a small number of Falcon 040. The machine never saw full-scale production. Atari instead chose to focus its efforts on the ill-fated Jaguar games console. The similarity between the Falcon 040 styling and that of the PlayStation 2 is clear, even if the Sony machine comes in black. Its internals are obviously very different. Both are designed to lie flat or stand on their edges. Looking at the Falcon 040, it's obvious this isn't a one-to-one comparison, but it does stand out. The ribbed for your pleasure component would have been on the left, as if the whole design was mirrored, but the wider ribbed portion would have been on the bottom if placed on its side. PlayStation 2 owners would know the ribbed component was on the top. In both the media component, a floppy drive on the Falcon, and a DVD player on the PlayStation would have been on the top/left component, with some multimedia connectors on the bottom part. It looks like the power button would have been on the top/side versus the consistent front location on the PS2, notably right next to the eject button. Obviously, the pair of systems are also drastically different in colour and branding. Another site, the now defunct The Unheard Nerd, would comment, "One might imagine that a team of designers spent huge amounts of time honing the look of the PlayStation 2. Or did they just jack it from Atari?" It seems that Sony owes a significant debt of gratitude for the design of their console to then competitor Atari. In 1992, Atari Corporation produced their final home computer, the Falcon 030. Similar in style to previous models from the company, the product was criticised for its poor choice of internal components and compromised functionality. Shortly after, in 1993, Atari underwent a significant restructuring of the company and diverted their focus to the burgeoning console market and their own project, the Jaguar. As a result, the Falcon was discontinued, but not before creating prototype Falcon 030/040 models based upon a microbox case. The microbox case took the machine in a different direction style-wise, borrowing in part from a traditional desktop casing, but with a compartmental aesthetic, which demonstrates clearly where the inspiration for the PlayStation 2 came from when released some 8 years later. Side by side, the similarities are undeniable, and indeed Sony pay reference to Atari's Falcon 030 and 040 in their patents for the console. While the similarities between these two systems are obvious, with Sony even acknowledging this themselves, what is a little less clear is what went into the process of them ending up looking almost like the same platform. Some believe it may have been the case that Sony simply saw the design and liked it enough to purchase it from Atari. After all, the company in the 90s didn't have an issue with selling designs and moulds, with the likes of the Atari Jaguar years after its demise, infamously becoming a very expensive piece of dental office equipment. One of the companies that took advantage of this was Imagine Systems Corporation, a dental professional technologies company that released possibly the most expensive and obscure piece of gaming tech. It boasted an anti-fog lens tip, capture buttons much like your modern consoles have, a macro focus, a high-resolution CCD chip, a lightweight anti-torque cable, an ergonomic handpiece, and a remote on/off sensing. They advertised the console, the Hot Rod, as modular in design, and fact is, the Hot Rod from Imagine is destined to set a new dental standard for intraoral camera design, versatility, and the best part of all, patient comfort. Yes, the Hot Rod was an intraoral camera, an expensive piece of tech you'd find in a nice dentist's office, based on the comments of NeoGAF. The Imagine Systems Hot Rod came out in 2000 and was discontinued a few years later. It's long forgotten and cannot be found now. It was never sold to the general public, only to dentists, so the actual machine is impossible to find. If and when you do find one, it would most likely cost a few grand, as it's top-of-the-line medical equipment, not exactly a toy. So, with this being the Jaguar's strange fate, could the Falcon Microbox's fate be a little bit more mainstream? Who knows for sure, but this is certainly interesting stuff. I mean, what's next? Will we find out that Atari Lynxes were repurposed and were used as radar screens in the 1999 Kosovo War? Or how about the 3DO shells being repurposed to hold technology used in a gynecologist's surgery? Only time will tell. Let me know if you think the PlayStation 2's design was a particular sign of laziness from the Japanese giants, or an efficient repurposing of withered technology in the comments below.